This video will teach you how to factor by grouping. We're going to factor by grouping whenever we have 4 or more terms. So the steps are kind of like what it sounds like. I'm going to group the terms. So I'm going to group these 2 terms together and these 2 terms together. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to pretend that those 2 terms don't exist. If I'm looking at just these 2, I'm going to use GCF. You should notice they have an a squared in common. So essentially what I'm doing is dividing each of these by a squared. When I divide them by a squared, I end up with a plus 1. And then I grouped the other 2 terms together, and I'm going to pretend the first 2 don't exist. When I group these 2 together, their GCF is a negative 2. When I take that out, I end up with a plus 1. And now if I look, this term and this term are in common. They're a GCF. So I'm going to take that piece out, and then I'm left with a squared minus 2. So this is my factored form. Let's take a look at the next one. Factoring by grouping. I have 4 terms. I'm grouping them 2 at a time. My GCF for the first 2 is x squared. When I take that out, I'm left with x plus 5. My GCF for the next 2, they really don't have anything in common, but they both have a negative. So I'm going to take out a negative 1. When I take out a negative 1, I have an x plus 5. If at this step these pieces don't match, something went wrong, go back and check. Maybe you need to reorder your terms, or maybe it's not factorable. In this case, they do match, so I can continue on. I have x plus 5. What's left over goes in the second parentheses, so I have x squared minus 1. I'm going to put a star next to this one because we are going to factor completely. My second parentheses here can be factored further using dots. So my first parentheses is unchanged. I'm not factoring it. I'm just bringing it down. My next parentheses is dots. You should remember from Algebra 1 or the previous video. X, 1, 1. I'm taking the square root of each piece. 1 plus, 1 minus. So this is the factored form of my original polynomial. So to factor by grouping, you're going to do GCF 2 at a time, 2 at a time. The matching parentheses comes to the front. The other 2 pieces, or what's left over, goes to the next parentheses. And we use this method whenever we have 4 or more terms.